pulls up for Trickle in the 66 and Wallace. Here he comes, trying to bust through. Dale Earnhardt on a roll in the back straightaway.
You could have got all kind of bets in the garage area that a car could not have been able to do that on his own. But Dale Earnhardt, look at him, he's going for the lead.
And has it. In 2 laps, Earnhardt thrusts himself right through the field, bottom of the racetrack.
3, 2, 1.
Man, wow. How awesome was that? Dale Earnhardt coming from last to first in 2 laps. That was the heart of the Busch Clash. That's what the Busch Clash was about. That was back to the Speed Week days, you know? You know, back when we had the ARCA race, the Daytona Dash race, I mean, the Busch Clash, the Twin 125s, the Xfinity Busch Series out there, Cup Series, now, trucks got introduced through the years and everything else. Those were the days, right? Or were they? Now I want to fast forward to 2020 at Daytona, where only 6 cars finished the race.
Kyle Larson, Hamlin 1 lap down, everybody else on the lead lap. Let's try it again. Green, white, checker.
Now, this is something that's very widely talked about because there's a lot of people that want to see the race go back to Daytona. A lot of people are liking what's going on now with the quarter-mile bull rings. And let's just be honest. The Clash has changed repeatedly throughout the years. Now, for a lot of us, it just seems like it was the Busch Clash. But in reality, this race has changed pretty much more than any other race in history. So let's go back through the history. Let's take a look at this because the beginning of the Busch Clash was in 1979. There was a brand manager for Anheuser-Busch who had this idea of going, you know what, we need to push the Busch brand. We need to get it out there. So he came up with this idea of saying, you know what, let's take the previous year's pole winners and put them in a 20-lap shootout that we could do in 30 minutes of broadcast television time. A great little deal. And they went to CBS and presented this to them. And CBS was like, well, hell yeah, let's do this. This is great. And with that, this became the first broadcast that CBS had of NASCAR racing. And, let's take a look at this. Look at these guys. These were the men. Those are manly men out there in those race cars. And the race was won by Buddy Baker. 1979, Buddy Baker claiming that first victory. Now let's move to the next year. And I'm going to skip around to a few different years, but there's a point to all this. Let's move to 1980. Now, I want to clear the air about some beliefs because this is brought up a lot. I even see it in my comments and everything else about alcohol and different things in racing. There was a really big belief that Richard Petty would not run a alcohol label on his car. And let's just clear this up. In 1980, Richard Petty ran the Busch Clash. And there's a good reason for this, because in 1979 at Bristol, he won the pole. And for anybody that thinks, yeah, Richard Petty didn't run no alcohol labels back then, take a look at this. You'll see right there on the fender, that is a Busch contingency sticker, which you had to have to run this race. Now, unfortunately for Richard, didn't do the best in the race, but he still did it. And I might do an episode on this a little bit later about the whole thing with Richard Petty and how he grew from this. But let's move on now to the mid-'80s. Let's just say that. Because this was a different time here as well. This is when we got into the more square body cars. And there were some incidences that happened that put different fears in car owners and drivers. Just take a look at Bobby Allison.
Coming out of turn 4, Bobby Allison slams the wall. Bobby Allison, Chevrolet Monte Carlo destroyed, and for the first time in the 5-year history of this event, there is a caution, and I believe it will go right to red.
Now, one of the interesting parts about this was a primary car that was built for Bobby Allison for the Daytona 500, because at this time, you kind of wanted to test out these cars to see what you could do in the 500, and unfortunately, it was destroyed. And then, ironically, the car that he had for a backup was the car that he won the Firecracker 400 the previous year at Daytona in, was destroyed in a practice crash. So they had to go back to Charlotte, pick up 2 other cars, basically show up with new cars. Wasn't really a feasible idea for car owners at the time and everything else. And let's fast forward to the next year with Ricky Rudd in the Busch Clash.
Oh, trouble! Ricky Rudd slamming toward the wall, crashing, rolling over.
Running in a tight little pack, wasn't a lot of cars in that race. It was like 12 cars. And I remember the guy behind me, Jody Ridley at the time, coming out of turn 4, barely nudged in the back of hit me in the back bumper, barely nudged me, but it did, it broke my car loose.
Now, a very violent wreck for Ricky Rudd right there. So much, in fact, that he had to tape his eyes open to race in the Daytona 500. And this is something that went back to the teams and everybody else, the sponsors and everybody, because, I mean, this is Wrangler back then, you know, and you had Earnhardt and you had Rudd. I mean, here's Wrangler, and, you know, they want this guy competing for a championship. But here was the deal, you know, you get hurt in the clash, you might miss a race. So that would be very detrimental to your season. So it started stirring up a lot of things with different people at that time. And now we're going to fast forward to 1988, because in 1988, restrictor plate racing come in, and the Busch Clash just kind of got a little stale because they were not able to pass. A lot of things that were going on just weren't the most exciting racing. And NASCAR really paid attention to this, because in 1991, that race there, you know, with Earnhardt and everything else, they changed it. They changed it to 2 10-lap segments, and halfway through, they inverted the field. And, you know, that first one, my God, it looked amazing. Looked like we're onto some show business here and everything else. And it was, because it lasted up until 1997. But then in 1998, it changed. It changed over to the Budweiser Shootout. And it also changed lap count, because now it went to 25 laps. And also introduced the Bud Shootout Qualifier, which this was a race for drivers who were not eligible to run in the race because they hadn't won a pole, but the winner got to race in the race. Very similar to the All-Star. So it was something that worked, and it worked up until 2001. And this is when Fox took over the broadcast, and at this point, they made a really big change. Now they changed over to running a 70-lap race. And, you know, it worked. Worked for a couple years. People were happy. Everybody was good. But then in 2003, the race moved to Saturday night. No longer on Sunday, moved to Saturday night with a break at lap 20. So obviously there was something that they needed to change in there. 70 laps just out there was not exciting for fans. Obviously, needed a change. So they put the break in there. And that worked for a little while. And then in 2008, everything really changed again. Because this year, Molson took over as the official sponsor of NASCAR. And this is when the Coors Light Pole Award come in. It was no longer the Bud Light or the Busch or any of the Anheuser-Busch Pole Award. Now it was Coors Light. And this changed everything. Because Budweiser was sitting back going, okay, you're no longer winning our stuff. We're still sponsoring the Clash. We still got all this stuff. So it just don't have the same feel to it. So in 2009, it really changed. And with this, it allowed past winners. It allowed past champions. It allowed other people to get into the race. And it was something to soup it up. Excited for the fans. Make things more accommodating for you, the viewer. And it worked. It worked for a little while. And then in 2013, well, everything changed again. Because now it switches over to the Sprint Unlimited. Sprint's in the series, putting their name out there and everything else. Ugly ass logo, I'm going to tell you that. But that's the way it worked. That's the way it happened. And then in 2017, once again, it changes again. And it changes over to the Advanced Auto Parts Clash. And interestingly, throughout this time right here, this is when preseason testing, everything else stopped and everything. So a lot of the teams were using this race as a testing facility for them, testing procedures. So it caused a lot of single file racing. It caused a lot of things to happen, and then it caused some wrecks. And again, these people were using these cars, these team owners were using these cars as testing for their Daytona 500 cars. So they just really didn't want to destroy their cars. So it was very interesting. And that leads us to 2020. Again, where 6 cars finished the race. Crash Fest. At the end of that, NASCAR decided we need to make some changes. So they're going to make some big changes again. So it moves over to Tuesday night instead of Saturday night on the road course. And what happens? Well, a lot of crashes, a lot of everything else. And, you know, the interesting thing about this is that was enough to make everything change. And this is where people got really scattered with every idea and avenue of this, because then what do? We go to LA. We go to Los Angeles to race in a Coliseum. Not even a racetrack, not even a place set up to be a racetrack. But NASCAR, I think, was kind of desperate at this point. They wanted to make this race something that was entertaining, I guess. So they trek all the teams across country for basically half the pay, which a lot of people were pissed about and everything else. But here was the deal. Ratings. And I don't like to talk about ratings. I hate ratings. Nothing I even like to discuss. It don't matter to me about ratings. If I like a race, I like it. That's the way it is. But ratings went up. And in the past, I mean, they've been getting like 1.5 million views on this stuff and everything else. And then immediately it went up to 3.5 million views here. So, you know, that was the best since 2016. But here's an interesting fact about this, is that this was the first race since 2016 that the race was actually broadcast on Fox, because prior to that, it was on FS1. So everybody didn't have cable, which I hear people complain about all the time now about, I got to get this, I got to get Prime, I got this to watch the races. Yeah, a lot of people didn't have the cable to watch it. So, yeah, they're going to go up. But interestingly, in 2016, when it was on Fox, they had 4.8 million views. So they were down 1.3 million views, even though it was on regular television. So that kind of tells me something right there. But of course, you know, the race continued out there at LA. I wasn't a big fan of it. I don't like it. It's not a racetrack. It was new asphalt put down. It wasn't weathered. It wasn't racing. It was a preset racetrack that they put together with construction guardrails around the inside, or concrete barriers and everything else. Brand new asphalt surface. And teams just left to travel across country to put on a show. And that brings me to the halftime shows and everything else with that, because I was never a fan of that. To me, I mean, bringing in a bunch of hip-hop artists and all this stuff, it's great. It's cool. I know you're trying to attract a different venue of fans and everything else, but just continue to push away long-term fans with stuff like that. Could have had some, you could have had some better entertainment. Let me just say that. But that's a whole different story. But that brings me to today with Bowman Gray, because I'm going to say I'm personally, I'm not going to judge Bowman Gray. I'm not going to judge Bowman Gray yet, because they haven't raced there. It could be entertaining. It could be fun. This could be exciting. This could be great. Who the hell knows right now? Or we could be sitting here Monday morning going, damn it, just please take this back to Daytona. But at this point right now, we haven't been out there. We haven't seen what's going to happen. And the greatest thing for me is with this right here is you got Tim Brown and Burt Myers, two local legends at Bowman Gray they're going to run this race. These are guys who have dreamed of running in the Cup Series, and they're getting their opportunity to do this. And that's pretty amazing to me, because that wouldn't happen at Daytona. That wouldn't happen at a lot of tracks. And it's going to happen. So for that reason alone, I welcome this race. And again, I'm not going to judge it until it's over. But this is where I want your input. How do you feel about all this? Do you really just want to see the race back at Daytona? Would you like to see it moved around? Me personally, I'd like to see it at Rockingham next year. I'd like to see what the hell that would do. I mean, we got the Xfinity, we got trucks coming back in there. You know, Casey Kane come out of retirement to go race at Rockingham this year. So that's how exciting that is. I'd be cool with that. Same weather, same, you know, we're in the same area, so why not do it? But I'm not giving up on Bowman Gray until I see what the action is, because it can be exciting. If you take a look at this right here, some cool racing. Also, some pretty cool pileups, some pretty cool action right here. And take a look at this. Pit crew going at it in the infield. And let's just finish it out with this. Bubba Wallace on the front stretch, getting into it there, you know. So, I mean, imagine the crowd. They're right there. They can see this. They're feet from this. So it's exciting. That's why they call it the Madhouse. So, again, I'm not going to judge it until then. But for you, I want them comments down below. How do you feel about this? Would you rather see it at Daytona? Would you welcome it again at Bowman Gray? Do you want to see it move around? And this is what I want you to do. With your comments, I also want you to put your age in it, because it kind of gives me a better idea of where we're going with this. And hopefully NASCAR will see this. So this is kind of your vote. This is kind of your word. Say what you want to say right now. But anyways, hope everybody enjoys the racing out there this weekend. Hope we have some cool action. And as always, see you at the checkered flag.